What's up, folks? What's going on? Welcome to the Spun Today Podcast, the only podcast that is anchored in writing, but unlimited in scope. I'm your host, Tony Ortiz, and I appreciate you listening. This is episode 233 of the Spun Today Podcast, and in this episode, I'm sharing some throwback advice from Spun Today questionnaire submissions that we've received in the past. For the uninitiated and those unfamiliar with the Spun Today questionnaire, it is a set of 5 questions found at spuntoday.com/questionnaire, available for fellow writers and creatives such as yourselves to submit responses for. And then I take those responses and share them with the audience here in a future episode of the pod. And this is low-key one of my favorite aspects of the pod because I'm into finding out how the sausage is made. I'm into behind the scenes type of things. And I feel like this is that, but at a much more intimate level, at a creative level, where folks open up and share about their process and inspirations, tips, etc. It also helps reinforce, at least for me, that nobody really has it, quote unquote, it figured out. Because I think a lot of times as creatives, we operate from an insecure place of, is my writing good enough? Is this story getting the point across that I wanted to get across? Was that a good podcast episode, etc., etc.? And embedded with those thoughts at times is the belief that others do have it figured out. So-and-so has written a better story. So-and-so put out a better podcast on the same topic, so on and so forth. And what's that quote? Comparison is the thief of all joy. Definitely rings true there in moments like that. So I definitely appreciate those of you that have taken the time to share your feedback through the questionnaire. I gain a lot from it. Hopefully the listeners do as well, which I'm sure you will. So what I'm going to share with you guys today is a mashup of 4 previous submissions that I wanted to reshare. We have one from Amy Marcello. We have one from someone who chose to remain anonymous, and that is an option for you to check off when you fill out the questionnaire. We have another submission from fellow writer Joshua Robertson, and last but not least, from Elaine Almonte, Spun Today alum, who has been a guest on the pod in the past a couple times. Before we get into the episode, I'm going to share with you guys a little bit more about what the questionnaire is and where to find it in this intro drop, and then we will jump right into the episode. If you're a fellow creative, a cool way that you can help support the Spun Today podcast and actually be part of the podcast is by filling out my 5-question questionnaire located at spuntoday.com/questionnaire. Here you'll find 5 open questions related to your craft, your art, what inspires you to create, what type of unrelated hobbies you're into, and what motivates you to get your work done. You can choose to remain anonymous or plug your website and your work. And once you submit your questionnaire, I read your responses on a future episode of the Spun Today podcast. It's completely free at no cost to you. And what I like to say about it is that if your responses could potentially spark inspiration in someone else, why not share that? spuntoday.com/questionnaire. Now, the first person that submitted a questionnaire this week chose to remain anonymous, so I'm not going to say the person's name or anything like that, or where you can contact them if you would like to. But I, like all others, am going to read their answers to the questionnaire, obviously, to help, share their insights and their tips with other people that could hopefully have a ripple effect of motivation for others, including myself. Okay, question number 1 is, relating to your craft, do you remember the first thing that you ever wrote or created? And this anonymous person stated, the very first thing that I remember creating was a mini book in 1st grade. I drew pictures and had to write a story to go with them. I think I still have it somewhere. It was plain awful. I cannot draw, but I remember feeling very proud that I created something. And that's the dopest part of that is that you still have it somewhere. And I would say definitely find where that somewhere is before you lose it, and keep it in a safe place that you can look back on and cherish, and who knows, give it to your kids one day and just look back on it. It's really cool to have a piece of your childhood like that, especially if it's tied to a specific passion that you have for something like in this example, like writing. I remember when I was in like 8 or 9 years old, and I mentioned this in the past, so for those of you that have heard this already, bear with me, I'm sorry, but it's pretty fitting to this response in the questionnaire. The first short story that I ever wrote, I was like 8 or 9 years old, and I remember it was a cross between like an army movie and Encino Man, and it was called The 1,000-Year-Old Soldier, and I wrote it in a black and white marble notebook. And the premise was a soldier got trapped under an avalanche and turned into a block of ice, and then when he thawed out, he realized that 1,000 years had passed and he was in the future. And I don't remember much else aside from that, but I remember writing it, and I remember obviously the premise of it and even the notebook that I wrote it in. And I remember I had this metallic box that had this fugazi little key lock on it, and I remember keeping it there, and I used to use that box and store my quote unquote private stuff in there and top secret stuff. I'm fucking 8 or 9 years old. And long story short, I stopped using the box. It was like in the basement somewhere, or wound up like in I don't even know where it wound up. But fast forward to years later, we moved and everything. I found that box in the garage, and I remember like when I saw it, when I found it, like I remembered right away of like the book and the short story and just like stuff that I had in there. I was like, oh shit, I can't believe this box still like exists. I had completely forgotten about it. And I went to it, I opened it, and it was full of like my father's tools and shit like that. And I never got to like see the book again, but it would have been pretty dope if I had. So imagine that story, your version of, and you actually finding and still having that picture book now. And that's a much happier ending than finding a bunch of screwdrivers and stuff in its place. But yeah, find that. The next question is, what inspires you to write or create? And the response was, I find that I always have a muse. Sometimes that muse is a person, sometimes it's emotion itself. I use them all to fuel my writing, and I couldn't agree more. Inspiration strikes very randomly, very sporadically, sometimes very intentionally. And yeah, I'm the exact same way. I could hear a song that inspires me to write. I could hear a quote in a movie, and that concept of the muse is just like, you need to physically get yourself to a pen and paper or a keyboard and let it flow through you and onto the screen or onto the page. And I'm completely with you on that. The next question is, what is a hobby that you have that is unrelated to your craft? And the response is, I'm an avid reader. I read hardcover books and listen to Audible. I am constantly reading all different types of books. And that is something I'm trying to do more and more of, especially as I've gotten into writing, obviously. They kind of go hand in hand. And believe it or not, reading is something that I used to fucking hate. Very much so. Never used to read at all. And now I really enjoy it. I'm just not the best reader there is out there, but definitely enjoy the process. And audiobooks are dope too, for that help me out with a few books that were kind of like dense and like tough to like read, and that I really enjoyed the audiobooks of, like what was it, Republic Lost by Lawrence Lessig, and also one of my favorite books, Mastery by Robert Greene. And those were pretty dope. And you guys should definitely check out audiobooks if you haven't, or like if you're in that kind of like gray area that you want to get exposed to certain things that you want to read, but you really don't like make the time like for it and stuff like that, definitely check out audiobooks. I have to download more of them actually. Let's see. The next question is, how do you get yourself to sit down and do your work when you're not motivated to? And the response is, that's tough. When I do feel, that's tough. When I do not feel inspired, I draw on other people's energy. I send out questions on social media that will strike chords of emotion in people. This works well for me. And that's a really good idea. I guess that's kind of like what this questionnaire is like for me. That's like my version of is sending out this questionnaire, and it helps spark, the recording of this podcast, for example, which has always been kind of like a closed loop, right? The podcast makes me want to write, or motivates me to write, keeps me honest, keeps me writing, and vice versa. Writing gives me content for the podcast, and it's kind of like a circle that purposely is set up to motivate me, to push me in the direction of where I want to be with both writing and podcasting. And that's a really good idea with the asking questions like on social media and just getting like different feedback from different people. This person actually, as well as the other person didn't choose to remain anonymous, but this one did, so that's why I'm just saying this person. I met through, or quote unquote met through Cyberdust, which is Mark Cuban's like social texting service thing that he started, or that he's a part of, and it's pretty interesting. I'm getting used to the I don't know, the format of it. Is that the right word for it? I'm getting used to using it basically, but I hear it's similar to like Snapchat, but Snapchat I've never used, except this does not give you an option to like save. Like Snapchat supposedly gives you the option to like save, the chats or whatever. Cyberdust does not, and Cyberdust as a company does not have like any servers or anything like that. So somebody sends you a message or a blast, like they call, or a dust. A dust would be like a DM, and a blast would be like a post. And when people see it or read it, once they open it, the clock starts, and it's a certain amount of seconds before it disappears, and it's not stored on any other servers or anything like that, which I would imagine means like low overhead for them, I guess. But yeah, that's the whole concept of it. It's like truly, nobody's reading your shit type of forum. And that's where I met both of these people. So yeah, I definitely get that, sending stuff out through social media to, spark conversation and interest and stuff like that, and draw on people's energy. And the final question of the questionnaire is, do you have any advice for other writers or creators, whether they're new, seasoned, or otherwise? And the response was, write your heart. People can tell if you're not writing from the very depths of your soul. If you always write for that, you will always touch someone. And that was my favorite response to your questionnaire, and I couldn't agree more. And how do I say this? Sometimes like with stuff that I write, I'm kind of like, that feeling of nobody's gonna get this except for me, or this isn't good enough for anybody else to read and stuff like that. And a lot of the time it is, don't get me wrong. But in terms of my stuff, but as long as it's coming from that place, from that like genuine, real place, it's gonna reach somebody, it's gonna touch somebody, and you have no way of gauging who it does and who it doesn't touch. And I've written about this in certain free writing posts, and the quote unquote announcement that I'm going to tell you guys about right after the next questionnaire. I get into it in there as well. But I think it's your responsibility as a creator, as a writer specifically, to just let the thing out, let it out, and allow it to have the chance of reaching and touching someone. And if it does, great. And if it doesn't, it at least meant that to you, and it was therapeutic in that way for you. And you are someone too, right? So yeah, thank you very much, person that shall remain anonymous per your request. And I really appreciate you taking the time to fill out the survey, the questionnaire, and it was a great one. Thank you very much. And we have one more questionnaire, like I told you guys. This one, let me just make sure. This person said it does not matter in terms of them remaining anonymous or not. And if you choose that, I'm gonna say who you are. And this person is Amy Marcello. So Amy, thank you in advance for taking the time. Question number 1 of the survey. Relating to your craft, do you remember the first thing that you ever wrote or created? And Amy's response was, before I could write, my mom used to have me tell her a story, and she would write down everything I said, word for word, even when it didn't make sense. The stories were usually about birds or animals that like to play and sometimes get into trouble. It is nice looking back and reading the grammatically incorrect details to a young and very vivid imagination. And I thought that when I read the questionnaire, when I received it, I thought that was like such a dope idea. I was actually gonna tell my brother to do that with my niece when she gets old enough, when she's actually making like sense, because now she's, you know, barely a month out from her, not even a month out of her 1-year birthday, so she's still like speaking gibberish and stuff like that, and she knows how to say cat and no. But definitely when she starts making sense, that would be a pretty cool idea to do something like this, and have her create stories and write them down and give them to her in the future. And it's really dope that your mother did that for you, and kind of planted that seed of creating stories, I guess, for you, which is really, really cool. Definitely a different version of reading your kids bedtime stories, right? Allow them to create their own. That seems pretty cool. It's definitely something I would want to do. Thanks for sharing that. And the next question is, what inspires you to write or create? And Amy's response is emotional reactions to anger, heartbreak, empathy, revelations, and aha moments. And yeah, tying into the previous questionnaire that I read, it's, you know, inspiration literally comes from anything and everything and anywhere. And I guess in Amy's case, she seems to be more of the it comes from places of like heightened emotion, whether it's like empathy or heartbreak, like she says, or anger, or revelations and aha moments. Those are like peaks in emotion, right? But it's awesome that you can take any of those emotions from it, like any of those peaks, and channel them into creating, which is key, which is awesome, because all that emotion, all that rawness, all that realness comes out in your writing. How much of it comes out is obviously completely up to you, and it's something that, as like writers and creators, that's what we're molding and shaping and honing and fine-tuning, right? But it's definitely dope to have that ability to steer it in that direction. The next question is, what is a hobby that you have that is unrelated to your craft? And she wrote, I love to dance. And that's pretty cool. I actually do not love to dance. I'm probably like the worst Dominican ever. And my people are very, very alegre, happy, dancey type people. And I'm very much so not. More of the introverted, quiet, leave me alone persuasion. But I could dance, not well or anything like that. I'm no fucking Patrick Swayze in Dirty Dancing, but I know how to dance, and you know, the once every fucking leap year when I do get the itch to dance, I'll like dance my ass off at that one party, and then, you know, never dance again for years to come. So I definitely get the appeal of it. When I you know, look back and think of like those specific moments when I've enjoyed it, and you know, dancing in itself is like very creative and very free, very flowy. You know, you follow certain preset rules, I guess, and steps in certain types of dancing. If you're just doing, I don't know, not all, I guess, but yeah, I see that connection. It's pretty dope. It's pretty cool. The next question is, how do you get yourself to sit down and do your work when you're not motivated to? And Amy responded, I try to find a quiet place without distraction. Sometimes music helps, but other times I need complete silence. And that was interesting to me, because I don't know, I guess it depends on my mood, because, and you know, judging from your response, I guess it's the same for you. Like sometimes you need complete silence, and sometimes music, you know, some sort of like background, like white noise, kind of gets you going. And I wonder from reading your response, Amy, if you mean that, let's say you don't want to write, because this is what I meant by the question, which, you know, if you didn't get that, that's completely my fault for the way it's worded. But when you're supposed to write, which should be like all the time, right? If you're into writing, how do you get yourself to physically get up and go sit down and write? I don't know, I guess I'm not sure if that's what you meant by your response, but if you meant that you could literally, like, you know, turn off the TV, make everything quiet, and then that gets you in the mood to write, that's fucking amazing. That's like a switch, like an on switch that you have there that you've, you know, disciplined and trained yourself to do. So it's kind of like, because I kind of feel like the answer that you gave is kind of after you get yourself to write, you just have to, you know, after you sat down and you kind of made that push in the direction of writing, that you kind of then have to like shut everything off, and then, you know, so shit could start flowing and you could start writing. That's like the toughest part for all of us, and I think that's a pretty well known and understood, you know, similarity amongst writers, that, you know, just actually sitting down and doing the work that's the hard part, like getting that push of motivation and inspiration to go and actually physically do the work. And lastly, the last question of the last questionnaire that we have for the day is, do you have any advice for other writers or creators, whether they're new, seasoned, or otherwise? And Amy responded, writing is the easy part. Don't let rejection letters be the demise of your passion. There are so many resources and directions to explore. The internet can allow your writing to touch any audience you want, and I think finding that in today's world is where you'll find the most value and have the most impact. And I could not agree with you more. Again, Amy, thank you very much for taking the time to fill out the questionnaire. That was a very, very dope response, and kind of the perfect segue to the announcement that I said, told you guys last week that I would have for you this week, which I'm not where I want to be with it, but I'm enough into it where I could announce it to, one, light a fire under my ass to make sure I get it done, and two, keep my word of having an announcement for you guys. So like I said, like Amy said in this last response, writing is the easy part. Don't let rejection letters be the demise of your passion. There are so many resources and directions to explore. I am in the process of self-publishing my first book, and that's the announcement. Ta-da! The Spun Today questionnaire response filled out by Amazon bestselling author Joshua Robertson. And Joshua is someone that I found on YouTube. Actually, he has a couple YouTube channels. The one that I've seen a handful of videos of that I find helpful, I linked to in the episode notes. He is, like I said, a fantasy author, an Amazon best-selling fantasy author, and he has a bunch of helpful videos online related to writing, like, for example, where to get reviews that I've watched, or why to join a writer community, how to characterize your characters, learn from your fears, like stuff like that have resonated with me. A bunch of the stuff that he's shared and spoken about, and he took the time to fill out the Spun Today questionnaire for us, and I appreciate that very much, and I'm going to share his responses with you guys now. Question 1. Relating to your craft, do you remember the first thing you ever wrote or created? And Joshua responded, the first story I remember creating was a horror story around the age of 9. Damn, that's awesome. That's how you know you're doing what you're supposed to be doing when it's something that you were doing when you were 9. He continues and says, the story focused on a group of kids going into a haunted house on Halloween. I continued to write short stories throughout the age of 15, and then finally completed my first novel at 17. Damn, that's awesome. At 17, I was trying to figure out, like, what worked better between Noxzema and Neutrogena or something like that. So that's really cool that Josh was able to do that at 17. Question number 2, what inspires you to write or create? And Joshua responds, my ideas are primarily inspired by dreams I have had throughout my life. My bestseller, Melkorka, was completely based off a dream I had in 2013. And that's really cool to hear because, like I've told you guys in the past, there's that again I've picked up from different writing podcasts and blogs and stuff like that. A tip I guess given by a lot of writers is to have a sleep journal. Sleep with like a book or something that you could write in next to your bed, and like when you wake up, just jot things down. I spent a long time like having certain ideas and then thinking that I'm going to remember them, and being too lazy to write them down. And then the next day I'm like, fuck, I had such a good idea, and completely, it's gone. So that's a tactic. If you guys can't remember your dreams, use that. I used that on 2 occasions so far, because I don't dream that often, or at least not anything that I have felt worthy of like turning into a story. But I've written 2 short stories, including the one that I still owe you guys, that I'm still working on, that I told you guys about. But one that I did put on the website called Chopper City, located at spuntoday.com/short stories. Chopper City, that was a story completely that came to me like in a dream. And I did an episode of like the Chopper City audiobook version of the podcast, where I go into the details of explaining where that story came from, etc., etc. But anyway, it's cool to hear that Josh was able to turn a dream into a bestseller. And the title of that book again is Melkorka. I'm gonna link also to Josh's Amazon or like book page, so you guys can check out his books as well. You can find that in the episode notes. Question number 3. What is a hobby that you have that is unrelated to your craft? And Josh wrote, I have another YouTube channel based around my business called Goblin Horde. And that's spelled Goblin for goblin, and horde, HORDE. I am lucky to have a hobby where I can be a nerd with my nerdy family and find support from a great nerdy community. And that is not the original YouTube page. Like I told you guys, he has a couple YouTube pages, but I did check this one out since Josh filled out the questionnaire, and it's pretty cool. I believe it's with his wife and children are a part of it, and it's pretty cool if you're into that type of thing. Check that out. Again, it's youtube.com/C/Goblin Horde. And by C, I mean the letter C, not SEE or SEA. Question 4. how do you get yourself to sit down and do your work when you're not motivated to? Josh responds, rarely do I find myself not motivated to write, but in those times I bribe myself with chips, salsa, and coffee. Nice. Definitely, bribing yourself and giving yourself, I guess like incentives like that definitely has to work or could help in working. In my case, I drink way too much coffee to be able to bribe myself with that as is, because then that means I would have to cut myself off to then bribe myself with it, which wouldn't work. So I'm gonna have to find something else to bribe myself with, but it's definitely a good tactic to use, and something that I could figure out something to implement, like something that I like, cut it out, and then I'm gonna give it to myself once I like complete a short story or something like that, which I'm struggling with now because it's taking so damn long to finish sometimes. Again, going back to the whole paralysis by analysis and writing and rewriting type of thing, I gotta take my own advice and just put it out there, right? Okay, and the last question: do you have any advice for other writers or creators, whether they're new, seasoned, or otherwise? And Joshua stated, join a writing community and build real relationships. That's something that I saw in one of your videos, Josh, and I have begun a little bit. I can't say like really actively, but I joined a couple like Facebook writing groups, and definitely have to look into that more deeply. It's logical advice. It makes sense. Surround yourself with people that you want to be around and learn from and learn with, and etc. And that is Joshua's responses to the Spun Today questionnaire, which is available to any and all creatives at spuntoday.com/questionnaire. The same 5 questions you can fill out your responses to and be part of a future episode of the podcast. Joshua Robertson, again, his Twitter, his YouTube page, as well as Amazon book page will be linked to in the episode notes. And Josh, thanks for taking out the time to fill out the questionnaire. The questionnaire that I told you guys about. So, Elaine Miss Montana Almonte is my best friend's kid sister. And come to think of it, she probably doesn't even know that I've ever referred to her as that, because it's not like I would introduce her to someone and say, hey, best friend's kid sister, this is so-and-so. Hey, so-and-so, this is my best friend's kid sister. You know what I mean? So it's not like something that she would probably hear. So when she hears this, she's probably gonna be like, what the fuck are you talking about? Best friend's kid sister. But yeah, it's like the cariño type of thing. Like I have referred to her as that in the past. Shout out to Elaine. She was kind enough to fill out the Spun Today questionnaire that is available to any of you fine folks to fill out if you are so inclined. And I will do the same exact thing that I'm doing now, and I'm going to share the responses to those 5 questions, which are geared towards creative types, but as you guys will hear in a bit. Let's jump in and see what she had to say. Question number 1 is relating to your craft. Do you remember the first thing you ever wrote or created? Aileen responded, yes. A journal entry in 4th grade. My school gave all the girls journals for Christmas. That's so sexist. How about the guys? No, let me stop. That's pretty cool. That reminds me of in 7th grade, we had something similar. Not, we didn't get like journals or anything like that. And it definitely wasn't the first thing I ever wrote, but my 7th grade English teacher, which is part of the dedication section, a large part of the dedication section within my book, Make Way For You, available now. She made us write journals in class, and she called them lit logs, short for literature logs. And I don't remember if it was daily or weekly or what it was, but we would write them. It would usually be based on something that we were reading in class. And she would give us like feedback on it, and I remember like the feedback she would give me was just like so elaborate, and she was like so into like whatever it was that I wrote, and really liked the way I wrote, and always gave me compliments and stuff like that. And it's it's definitely boosting to have that type of support from a teacher or from a school and stuff like that. So it's pretty dope that you got those journals in the 4th grade. Now, the response to this question also reminds me something that I told myself that I was going to do after Daniele Bolelli's response to this question in a past questionnaire, and that is that the way I wrote the question was, do you remember, the first thing you ever wrote? My assumption was in crafting that question, which clearly hasn't like permeated, is that people would say, oh yes, and what I wrote was blah blah blah, because I would love to hear that part of it. So Elaine, tell me if you remember what it was they wrote. Hit me up and let me know. And I definitely have to amend that question on the website. Watch me forget until the next questionnaire comes out. All right, question number 2. What inspires you to write or create? And Elaine wrote, people stories, family bonds, things humans experience and think are unique to them, pretty things, sad things. And I couldn't agree more. It's pretty much everything, right? Like different experiences that you go through, just life. As life happens to you or in spite of you or whatever, you absorb different sparks of inspiration. I feel like that's common in any writer that I've like followed or heard of in interviews and stuff like that. Their mind is always on in that way. It's always receptive to the type of input that would spark an idea or inspiration. So they tend to get it from anything, from the way the plate was, almost fell off the edge of the table, or how angry the guy was in the train that was complaining about the train being stalled, or how happy the little kid seemed that, was walking down the hallway, like anything. I like the whole things humans experience. Are you a humanist, Miss Montana? What about Shady? What about his experiences? No, let me stop. Question 3. What is a hobby that you have that is unrelated to your craft? Aileen wrote decorating, creating dessert tables for parties with specific themes. I also like to watch Luke Cage, Iron First. Is it Iron First or Iron Fist? Iron First. The Boondocks, Family Guy, and The Magicians. I know Aileen was into decorating. I didn't know she was into the whole creating dessert tables for parties and stuff like that, which is pretty cool because actually my sister-in-law is into that type of shit too. I think you guys have met before. But yeah, she's like heavy into that now. So it'd be cool to like connect you two, I guess. And she's learning how to make like Dominican cakes and all types of shit like that. The decorating, if I'm not mistaken, Elaine decorated for her father's retirement dinner that we all went to, which was dope, and everything was beautifully done and very, very tasteful, very elegant and modern / bohemian-y type of thing. So it's really cool. It's like a different type of creative outlet. That's not just watching TV like everything else here on the list. Luke Cage, I heard is dope. I heard it's good, and I gotta check that out. I haven't heard of any of the other ones. I think I've heard of the Boondocks, but I'm not sure what that is. Family Guy, obviously I know what that is. I watch it sometimes too. My wife is into that, and yeah, I haven't heard of the other ones. All right, next, how do you get yourself to sit down and do your work when you're not motivated to? And Elaine responded, I don't. Herein lies my issue. And this is something, as she knows, that I've busted her chops about in the past. Not that I'm on some fucking trying to sound like preachy or like be on my high horse, like, oh, I write and I'm the most consistent person ever and blah blah blah, because I'm far from it. If you guys saw I tweet out and post on my Patreon page the amount that I write per month. So I have a calendar right above my computer here, and for every day I had to put a check mark or an X mark. All the check marks represent days that I've written. All the X marks represent the days that I did not write. And I keep a ongoing tally. I've been doing this for about 1.5 years. For every month, or probably 2 years, for every month. I have like an Excel spreadsheet, and I have everything like mapped out and broken down into percentages. And last month I wrote, and I'll give you guys an exact number, on only 12 of the 31 days in March. So 12 days I wrote, 19 days I did not. That is a 38.7% completion rate in terms of the goal of, trying to write every day. And so I'm far from perfect. So I'm definitely not coming from that type of, do what I do type of thing. But I do get on her about it because like we've spoken about writing a lot in the past, and Elaine's probably like one of the first people to ever like read anything that I wrote. And I remember we used to give each other like little writing assignments, which was really cool for just to like exercise your writing muscle chops. Just give yourselves like a task, like a topic to write about, and just write like little paragraphs or a short story or whatever. Like I remember a cool one that she gave me was, look at somebody on the train when you're commuting to work tomorrow and write something about them. Like write, what you think their life is about or where they're going or whatever. And I wrote like a mini short story about this kid that I saw on the train that looked like young, probably like fresh out of high school or maybe college, and he had like a suit on and he looked nervous. And I wrote this like whole little short story about him going to his first job interview and being nervous about it, and how he was like all in his head and didn't even notice the girl next to him that was trying to flirt with him. And like I made all this stuff up, but it like exercised that like writing muscle, you know what I mean? So we used to do like shit like that and like email it to each other and comment on each other's stuff, and I really, really like Elaine's writing. I really enjoy it, which is why I like tell her to write more often and stuff like that. And the place that I am coming from is that like, through, creating this podcast and setting certain goals, writing goals, like trying to write every day, even though it's a lofty goal that I haven't hit yet. I think my highest accuracy percentage was like 70 something percent of the days that I actually wrote within a given month. But just like setting those certain goals, it's kind of like the whole aim for the moon, and if you miss, you land amongst the stars type of thing. It's like you're taking steps in the direction, at least, you're not just not writing at all. And you have to make certain like practical tweaks, I feel, that definitely come in handy. And what came in handy for me when I was, struggling, trying to like either wait for inspiration to hit me to write, which never happened, and then writing at night when I was also trying to, which I did for a long time, like just staying up late at like until like 1, 2, 3 in the morning and writing. And then I would feel the repercussions of that the next day, and I'd be just like even more grouchy than I normally am with my fucking like grouchy persona, and just like out of it and not feeling well and like stuff like that. And then I got the tip of another writer that filled out this questionnaire in the past, and he was like that he wakes up at 5:30 in the morning. He has a regular 9 to 5 day job. He wakes up at 5:30 in the morning, writes for an hour or two, and doing that for a couple years at a time, and like in a dedicated way. He like self-published like 2 or 3 novels or something like that. And a lot of people start out that way. Joanna Penn, which has a successful podcast and has a very interesting business model, which is a more realistic one to me to like in terms of pursuing it. Like she has multiple revenue streams in terms of speaking engagements and podcasting and writing books, and she writes also both fiction and nonfiction, which I try to do. And like she worked a day job for 6 years while simultaneously doing a podcast and writing books before she was able to generate enough from the writing books and podcasting and her authorpreneur, I think it is that she calls it, or some like marketing word like that, before she was able to like quit her job and just live off of that like full time. And then eventually her husband was able to quit his job and help her with her business. And it's something that snowballs over time, or that could snowball over time, but it definitely won't if you just don't like put in that work or make that decision. And it was like probably one of the hardest decisions, like for my lazy ass, because I can't wake up for shit in the mornings at all, especially while I was in that rut of, going to sleep mad late. If I'm going to sleep like at 2-3 in the morning, like trying to writing, and then trying to make that switch to, okay, tomorrow I'll wake up at 5:30, and then from there I'll start. And it's like, nah, shit won't happen that way. Like I had to spend a couple weeks of like forcing myself, because then I'm like wired at night and I can't like go to sleep that easily. So it took like weeks of like trying to force myself to go to sleep at 12, and then 11, and then 10, and then between 10 and 11, to then when I wake up at 5:30, which I do now, it doesn't impact me as much. And then then you kind of like flip it a little bit. You wake up that early, you do some writing, it could be half an hour, it could be 45 minutes, an hour, like whatever. It doesn't have to be like you need 5 hours before work or something, just something. And just let it snowball. And then by the time the next day comes around and it is 10, 11 o'clock at night, you're like naturally tired and you want to go to bed anyway, you know what I mean? And if that type of thing doesn't work for you, then we all have 24 hours in the day, right? We all have different responsibilities, family responsibilities, work responsibilities, and other people are able to get it done. So, which means that you can too. Like nobody's situation is completely unique in the sense that they can't, schedule their time in a way that would benefit them. You could block out for yourself, 30 minutes a day, or 30 minutes 5 days a week, or whatever it is, even if it's on a Saturday. Okay, let's say Saturdays you sleep in or something and wake up at 11, wake up at 10:30 and write for half an hour. Or Sundays, or whatever, Sunday nights between 7 and 8, cut out, give up fucking Iron First. It sounds whack anyway. Give that one up and write for an hour whenever you normally watch that shit. Like you have to balance it that way. But definitely I would want to like see more of that, and that would be like my advice, I guess, like my take on that. Not that you really asked for it, but there it is anyway. And lastly, do you have any advice for other writers or creators, new, seasoned, or otherwise? And Elaine wrote, spend time traveling, inspiration will come. I absolutely agree with the whole traveling thing. I think the more we experience and the more inputs we get, the better it is for us. It's like taking an ammunition that we use to like explode within our creative selves. The inspiration will come, I agree with to a certain extent, but as long as we're not only waiting for inspiration to come, as I pointed out, like with the last question, it's kind of like we gotta like meet it halfway type of thing, and don't just wait on it. That's pretty much it. That is Elaine's feedback. Elaine Almonte, thank you again. Elo B, very, very much. Really appreciate it. Anybody else that wants to give some feedback on it, hit us up. You guys know how to reach me. And yeah, thanks again. Best friend's kid sister, aka Elaine, aka Cole, aka Miss Montana, aka aka what up though. Alright, that's enough. And that, folks, was episode 233 of the Spun Today Podcast. I hope you guys got something from each and every one of those fellow creatives that took the time to fill out the Spun Today questionnaire. Again, absolutely for free at spuntoday.com/questionnaire. In case you guys ever want to check it out and be featured in a future episode of the pod. Hit me up on the episode page for this episode at spuntoday.com/podcast/233 and or on social media, and let me know which one of those responses resonated most with you at Spun Today on all social media. Thanks again for taking the time to listen, folks. I really appreciate it. This, once again, was episode 233 of the Spun Today Podcast. I am your host, Tony Ortiz, and I appreciate each and every one of you for listening. Until next time, peace. What's up, folks? Tony here. I hope you're enjoying this podcast as much as I enjoy producing it for you. Here are a few quick ways you can help support this show. You can support the Spun Today podcast by going to spuntoday.com/support. There, you'll find my merch section, where you can cop the iconic Podcasts vs. Anybody t-shirt in a wide variety of different colors and all different sizes. Also, if you're into cycling, you can cop the super soft, comfortable, minimalist design Spun Today Bike Club t-shirt. Also available in a bunch of different colors in all different sizes. There are a few other designs of different types of t-shirts. Definitely go there and check it out. spuntoday.com/support. It's the merch section, where you can also get a dope coffee mug. I have coffee mugs with the brand new redesigned Spun Today logo on one side and the tagline that I end every show with on the other, which is start taking steps in the general direction of your dreams. The mug is available in both black and white, because we don't discriminate here at the Spun Today podcast. Again, go to spuntoday.com/support and check out the merch section. You can support the Spun Today podcast by checking out my writing. You can go to spuntoday.com/free writing and check out some of my free association writing, which is intended to be some cathartic free writing, but oftentimes doubles down as motivation for myself and others. At spuntoday.com/short stories, you can read a bunch of the different short stories that I've written and actually listen to the audiobook versions of those short stories there as well. Another way you can help support my writing is by going to spuntoday.com/books and checking out what I have in store for sale. Digital copies are available in all formats, whether it be Kindle, iBooks, or a different type of e-reader. You can also purchase paperback copies if that's your preferred reading method. Currently available, I have my nonfiction, Make Way for You, which is a collection of freely written thoughts that were curated and put together as tips for getting out of your own way. Also available is my debut time travel novel titled FRACTAL. Again, go to spuntoday.com/books to show your support. Support the Spun Today podcast by following me on social, at Spun Today on Twitter, at Spun Today on Instagram. Please also check out and like my Facebook page, facebook.com/Spun Today, and subscribe to my YouTube page as well. On my YouTube page, not only will you get these full-length episodes, but you'll also get to check out some chopped up clips and bonus content. To get to my YouTube page, just search Spun Today on YouTube or click on any of the YouTube icons on the footer of my website. Also, don't forget to rate and review this podcast wherever it is that you're listening. It really does help. The Spun Today newsletter is available to each and every one of my listeners absolutely for free. All you have to do is go to spuntoday.com/subscribe and drop in your email address. What I'm going to do is brighten up everybody's least favorite day of the week by delivering 5 curated things within my weekly newsletter every Monday at noon. You're going to receive a photo of the week, a recommended podcast of the week. I listen to tons of podcasts from an array of varied interests. I cherry pick the very best ones so that you can check them out. I also share a video of the week, which can be anything from a tasty recipe to a dope rap battle to an enlightening TED Talk. I also share a quote of the week. And finally, for my fellow wordsmiths out there, a word of the week, so that you can step up your vocab. Again, this curated list is yours absolutely free by going to spuntoday.com/subscribe and dropping in your email address, and you can unsubscribe at any time. Again, go to spuntoday.com/subscribe, drop in your email address, and you'll get the very next one. If you want to help support the Spun Today podcast financially, you can do so by going to spuntoday.com/support. Here you'll find a few different ways that you can do so. You can shop on Amazon, but first go to my website, spuntoday.com/support, click on the Amazon banner, which will take you to Amazon's website where you do your shopping like you normally do. It will not cost you anything extra, but I will get credit for driving traffic to their website. Another cool way that you can help support this show is through Patreon, where you can set up reoccurring donations to my podcast, whether it be $1 per show, $2 per show, etc. And depending on how much you choose to pledge, you will receive some Patreon perks in return. Things like free writing pieces, free bookmarks, free digital copies of my books, etc. Again, my Patreon link can be found at spuntoday.com/support. You can also set up similar reoccurring payments via my Ko-fi page. And if you want to send a one-time happiness bomb donation, if you will, you can do so via my PayPal link. Again, all of which can be found at spuntoday.com/support. If you're a fellow creative, a cool way that you can help support the Spun Today podcast and actually be part of the podcast is by filling out my 5-question questionnaire located at spuntoday.com/questionnaire. Here you'll find 5 open questions related to your craft, your art, what inspires you to create, what type of unrelated hobbies you're into, and what motivates you to get your work done. You can choose to remain anonymous or plug your website and your work. And once you submit your questionnaire, I read your responses on a future episode of the Spun Today podcast. It's completely free at no cost to you. And what I like to say about it is that if your responses could potentially spark inspiration in someone else, why not share that? spuntoday.com/questionnaire. And as always, folks, substitute the mysticism with hard work and start taking steps in the general direction of your dreams. Thanks for listening. I love you, Aiden.
I love you, Daddy.
I love you, Grayson.
I love you, Daddy.